If your chest is stubborn, implement these special training tips and I promise you'll see more growth. No more size plateaus. This is the video you've been waiting for. First of all, the chest is a muscle that benefits tremendously from weighted stretching. That means for pressing, you'll want to spend the majority of your training in the bottom portion, as that's what's most hypertrophic. So if you're doing half reps or not embracing the deepest, hardest part, then gains are being left on the table. What's your purpose? Lifting heavy for the sake of ego or to efficiently build muscle? The optimal scenario is not only performing full range of motion pressing, but also exaggerating it to ensure stretch-mediated hypertrophy, which is scientifically proven to be uniquely stimulating. So let's discuss these principles. The first step for any chest press is to stop excessively arching your back like a powerlifter. Some T-spine extension is acceptable, but perfect leverages are not advised. In fact, the worse of a bencher you are, the better it is for hypertrophy, which should be even more encouraging for all you long-arm fellows. For your so-called curse is what guarantees bigger pecs than a T-Rex presser who lifts even heavier than you. It's all perspective. The intention is always about getting more out of less weight by creating disadvantaged leverages. So also narrow out your grip width such that the forearms are vertical or slightly in. This best leverages the rib cage, and the truth is, pecs and lats are very similar in this way. Arms flared out is proportionally more shoulders and coracobrachialis, not pecs. So you never want to be too narrow, but medium lines up best with the fibers and internal moment arms, while increasing arm bend in the bottom, thereby fully stretching the pecs. Next, consider eliminating all leg drive and embrace Larsen pressing. This transforms benching into an upper body only exercise. It slightly increases ROM, facilitates a refined scapulohumeral rhythm, and makes grinding out those last few reps more challenging without encouraging butt raising. Regarding stability, since that is an important criterion for hypertrophy, it's stable enough. After all, your whole body and upper legs are still in contact with the bench. And once you get the form down right, it'll be no more than around 10% less weight. I'd say this can be viewed as a pro, given the favorable stimulus to fatigue ratio. So as long as you're training with intensity and going close to failure, you won't see less results just because you're not overloading. Recovery and muscular bias must also be factored in. And in fact, studies actually demonstrate more chest activation from feet up benching. And anecdotally, every experienced lifter that I know has reported the same thing. The pec pumps and long-term growth are next level. And just to say, this is how I trained all last year. The carryover to regular benching was 1-to-1, and I gained a good inch on my chest. So yes, leg drive is overrated for hypertrophy. You don't need it, and there's a reason why it's not popular with bodybuilders. Now, if your bench is wobbly or too narrow, you can still put the feet down, but loosen them up as much as possible. Don't actively press with your heels or toes. By the way, if you have access to a cambered bar, I strongly recommend abusing it. The arch increases range of motion by inches, allowing for the nastiest stretch imaginable, more than a straight bar could ever offer. And I'd even argue more than traditional dumbbell presses, but more on that later. Truly brutal, so prepare to lift far less and feel those pecs ripping apart as the elbows are pointing straight down, even with me having shorter arms. So throughout this segment, I'm using the Bells of Steel Arch Nemesis bar, link in the description box, which feels phenomenal on the shoulder since the grip is mostly neutral. I like the semi-supinated position because some arm external rotation with any deficit press is easier on the shoulder joints. Here, we get a high stimulus without killing recovery. Now, since we've established the bottom of any press is most conducive to chest gains, then we want most of our sets to prioritize this important lengthened zone. And by far the best way is with tempo work, which in this case would only mean amplifying the negative and pausing the bottom. I am not advising the super slow method or slow concentrics. Simply lower for a good 2 to 3 seconds, hold away for a comparable time, then explode up as fast as possible. The best tempos being 3-3-1, 3-2-1, and 2-3-1. which refers to time in the negative, time in the stretch position, and time in the positive. Do this instead of rush, bouncy reps, and I promise your pecs will become a serious limiting factor. No comparison. You're reducing the stretch reflex, then allowing the pain to intensify. This is how you get humbled. And many of you two-plate benchers will be down right back to 185. For reps, I'd also recommend staying in the 5 to 8 zone given the time plus concentrated effort. Oh, and as a bonus, if you've had issues staying tight or being weak in the bottom of a press, it's also a great accessory lift. So even though tempo pause benching is primarily used for hypertrophy, many elite raw powerlifters actually love it for bench carryover since you're covered there too. The weight is irrelevant. Just maintain pristine form and everything is gonna be alright. Alternatively, if you wish to not hold the weight as there's a tendency to sink or lose tension, then you can always try the t-shirt touch. Popularized by Paul Carter and Bald Omni-Man, this is the idea of skinning your t-shirt on the way down such that the bar never bounces off your chest or initiates any kind of momentum. It allows you to maintain tightness, a super stretch, and power simultaneously, plus can strengthen an off the chest weakness. So you can either do touch and go in this way, which will again force you to slow down your negatives, which is the goal here, or you can pause right on the fabric, very similar to a Spoto press. So no matter which you favor, this type of stroke beats traditional touch and go any day. And just like with previous variations shown, keeps your ego in check. Feel free to mix and match. Next, if you're an arm dominant lifter who does not care about maximizing top end performance, then not locking out your elbows might be worth considering for a minor chest biasing effect. Not for time under tension, because that's not even a mechanism for hypertrophy, but as a form of lengthened partials, which evidence does confirm. And you would only do this for the exercise that don't feature much shortened contractions, like with barbell pressing or Smith machine pressing. Not ring dips, just to say. What's also cool is that if you're one of those people who prefers rigid scapular retraction, not locking out makes this effortless, since the final joint angles is where a natural protraction occurs. So grooving is smooth, and you should feel a bit more pec compared to tries. Weights lifted will also be about the same. And remember, you don't want to do baby reps. Get at least halfway up, always with repeatable rep quality. And of course, maintain some control to really synergize everything. This is how prisoners and pro bodybuilders have pressed for a long time. And it turns out they were onto something. Now, does this mean not locking out is superior for mass? Absolutely not. It's just another method, and high proximity to failure for your chest is what matters, which would happen either way since that's the prime mover of the bench. And we can even argue the mini break between reps would allow for slightly more effective reps, but I won't go there for today. So to simplify things, if you feel the need to reduce triceps involvement from pressing, then leave a slight bend at the end of the range of motion. Might give you 5 to 10% more chest gains. Who knows? Moving forward, let's talk about dumbbell pressing. It's often prescribed by hypertrophy enthusiasts since there's big range of motion in the bottom. No bar artificially stopping at chest level, and the upper arm is coming out and in without restriction, which is the main function of the pecs, humeral adduction. That said, the enhanced stretch is only valid when the lifter isn't that strong. Anyone who can rep between 80 and 100 pounds or more is going to have extremely comparable ROM to a barbell press. Why? Because the more 10-pound plates get stacked on that dumbbell, the wider it becomes. Or if it's one solid piece, same situation. That's why 100-pound Olympic plates are so darn wide without changing height. It's common sense. So if you're pressing with an optimal 45-degree arm angle, you're not lengthening the pecs any further because the plates will 100% of the time hit your torso, which honestly takes out the added benefit and can make dumbbells worse for hypertrophy, especially given their instability. I'd argue a cambered bar bench press is less problematic, unless you plan on doing high repetitions of maybe 15 to 20. So if you do want to go heavy with dumbbells and reclaim superiority, there is a non-black and white solution. But you're going to have to drop your ego again, which is the central theme for today's video. And that is combining a fly and press into one motion, also known as the barrel press. With a neutral grip and vertical forearms, bring the arms out as far as possible, ensuring the forearms don't tilt sideways, which would then become an isolation exercise, and then press out from that deep position. Because of the converging effect, it won't be a shoulder or triceps dominant style of press, as in the case of a closer neutral grip press, also known as the hip dumbbell press. You will feel an enormous stretch in your pecs, to the point where you actually have to be careful. So expect to lose around 20% strength, and for even more difficulty, consider holding the weighted stretch for a solid 2 to 3 seconds. It's going to hurt a lot. So much, in fact, they may need to prematurely stop the set, which is both a pro and a con. Regardless, the barrel press solves the problem of range of motion, nets an awesome stimulus-fatigue ratio, and doesn't compromise the joints like with flared out, internally rotated presses. Give it a shot, and you might not want to go back to the regular way. Speaking of chest isolation, if your pecs are truly resistant and compounds alone, even when hyper-optimized, just aren't cutting it, then add in some direct chest work. Minimalism remains a problem for arm dominant lifters too, and in this case, the fly you pick should meet the following criteria. 1. Be joint friendly. 2. Address which part of your chest is lagging, upper or mid to lower. And 3. Blend nicely with your pressing volume and resistance profiles, whether it be shortened or lengthened bias. Let me explain. See, if your pressing is all weighted stretch based, as in you performed tempo cambered bar bench and barrel presses, is then hitting a traditional dumbbell fly a good idea? Maybe, if you can handle the recovery, but chances are your pecs have been overloaded enough in the lengthened position. So it would only be wise as a replacement exercise if you'd originally planned on doing a third stretch-based press like weighted dips. But since your pressing volume threshold was reached for, say, the delts or tries, or central fatigue was simply too great, you weren't able to, but there was still some watermelon pec juice remaining. So if that's you, absolutely, get one more stretch-based isolator in and you'll be 100% wrecked. So here, I would just select an opposite angle. So if you just did flats and declines, perform incline flies. But again, for most people, lengthened flies are best done if you did a lot of converging presses or restricted range of motion presses like floor press, board press, decline, etc. Otherwise, a superior blending scenario is to reduce redundancy by complementing your stretch presses with squeeze flies, i.e. using cables, the pec deck, or my personal favorite, the Chest Krusher, which enhances the most muscular pose plus ability to strain. In this way, your pressing is designed to demolish the bottom range with the heaviest weights possible, and the isolation features maximum squeezing plus mind muscle connection. Each do their own job best, and you know that no pec gains were left behind because we cannot rely on one resistance profile to do it all. Just because weighted stretching is optimal doesn't mean we only do that. In addition, you can always use flies as a pre-exhaustion tool. This way your chest fails sooner on compound movements and you might experience better mind muscle connection. I know Bald Omni Man was isolating chest before hitting weighted dips, and for him it made all the difference in finally feeling the correct muscles. Even going up to 5 plates wasn't cutting it. See how simple tricks can make all the difference? And one more thing to add in here is that you don't necessarily have to start with pre-exhaust, but you can hit flies in between your presses. So if you did a flat bench, followed up with the Chest Krusher, then 45-degree incline bench. It's in the middle. So this combo is effective since we're weaker in the short position. Try getting that over with first and see how it affects the rest of your workout. Finally, if you've only ever done free weights and want a bit more stability out of your presses, consider throwing in at least one machine press. Ideally, after your unstable exercises if combining both. Prime Fitness machines are number one. After that, hammer strength. And for chest, it should be a converging press. This way you're getting the best stretch and squeeze. Plus, range of motion cannot be obstructed by a bar or plates. Now, the fact that we're taking out stabilization also allows for the greatest motor unit recruitment of the primary movers. So chest force production is as high as it's ever gonna be. No coordination, less internal bracing, just pure dummy pressing. If you go to failure on these, I'd even argue you won't need as much volume. In fact, I'd recommend 2 sets of incline and 2 sets of decline or flat. Like, I generally favor decline since the chest contractions are unmatched, and if I'm only hitting one machine, I want the one that allows me to push the hardest. Alternatively, you may experiment with the hated Smith machine. I, among many others, used to talk trash about it because it developed false movement patterns, but that's only problematic in an athletic specificity context. For bodybuilding, this doesn't matter. Now, of course, the Smith doesn't converge, so there's no added muscular benefit, and it's still a bar, but it's stabler than a barbell press, which can allow you to strain your pecs a bit more. Certainly not worthless, especially if you're not an advanced bencher. So I would hit your weakest area. If it's upper chest, do incline Smith. And of course, slow down that negative, lightly touch the chest or pause, then explode back up. Same principles as before. So enjoy it and don't let the purists derail you from making muscle gains. With that said, you should now be fully equipped to balloon your pectorals. I hope you learned a lot. Let me know which tips are most relevant to you, and I'll see you all in the next Stubborn Muscle segment.